Redditors who work at remote places like forest officers, oil rig workers, etc. What creepy things have you noticed while at work? I work on North Sea oil rigs on an ad hoc basis off the coast of Scotland. Wouldn't say anything was particularly paranormal creepy, but it can be very unsettling / weird place. Fog can come rolling in out of nowhere and other rigs you can see off the sides can disappear in front of your eyes. Sometimes you can't see the walkway 6 feet in front of you, or if you're walking over grating you can't see the sea below your feet about 60 meters down from feck to sea, but you can hear it, albeit muffled. The fog can roll in over the course of a few minutes too, so a perfectly clear day becomes pea soup. You can also feel the rig moving / swaying on high winds, rough seas. Even though it's a fixed leg platform. Very unnerving to feel your office swaying when it shouldn't be. My last trip was my first ever night shift, and I found it particularly unsettling as you've got the background noise of the plant, but I walked around the whole rig without seeing another living soul for the whole shift. Usually there are about 130 people on board, although smaller rigs have smaller head counts. Usually once a trip I'm hit by this awareness that you are just very isolated and in the middle of nowhere. Most rigs I've worked on are an hour's chopper ride from land. So if things go wrong it can escalate very quickly. When I was 15 years old, I was doing my 4 AM newspaper delivery round on bicycle. I was driving into the garden of this one subscriber, where I saw 2 guys with flashlights looking through the windows of the house. I was a bit in shock, and just said good morning guys. They were just as much in shock and an awkward silence followed. I tried to break the silence by asking if I could pass them to deliver the newspaper through the door. One of the guys said the person living in that house did something to his family and they took it as an opportunity to get away in their car that was still running. When they were gone I rang the doorbell at the house to tell them what happened and they should keep an eye out. This is how you end up like that kid in Breaking Bad. Damn it, Todd. Used to be a supervisor for a janitorial company and a couple times a week I had to go to a middle school and clean their hallway floors and gymnasium with a Zamboni type vehicle that mopped and scrubbed the floor. When I was there I had the whole school to myself. Used to get finished quickly and go to the library and read while eating my dinner. Well, one morning after being there, I get a call from school security and they want me to come in. When I get there I see a police car too. Uh-oh. I think. They ask me a few questions like, did you notice anything out of the ordinary or strange while you were here last night? No, I hadn't. Usually have headphones in. Security then shows me camera footage of someone breaking into one of the classrooms while I was riding the Zamboni not far away. I was there for another 2 hours. Nothing was stolen. But the worst part was they didn't have footage of the person leaving. They didn't go out the way they came in. And police had to sweep the entire school. Never did find out what happened with that one. My mom used to live in a small town in the Cascade Mountains and worked as a forest ranger. The creepiest thing that happened was when the oldest male ranger kept hitting on her and trying to get her to come home with him. Not very out of the ordinary. But many years later, after she left the town she found out he had been convicted of manslaughter and had killed a young female ranger right before she got hired. She would have probably been his next target. We were wrapping up for the day in northern Canada. I'm fueling up the side boom. I'm all by myself at this point, cause I was tired of listening to the laborers whine of the cold, so I told them I would take care of the rest. Think bulldozer with no blade, but a giant metal boom on the side that we use to razor and lower pipe. It's February so pitch black. I keep hearing some weird sound. I can't quite hear it cause the pump is too loud. I search around a couple times and see nothing. I get in the truck and take off, drive past the front of the side boom to see a cougar sitting on top of a dirt pile 15 feet away. The damn thing was just watching me there and probably could have ended me without me even realizing it. I've never seen a cougar in the wild before, and it's hard to understand just how big they are and how powerful until you see one up close. That thing leaped off the 6-foot pile and probably didn't touch ground for 15 to 20 feet. It's terrifying to think something so big and powerful could just be sitting there deciding if they want to make you dinner. I've been fishing out in the Gulf of Mexico, where they have some oil rigs. This rig wasn't being used from what we knew, so we would get pretty close to it to fish for red snapper. While we were out there, we could have sworn we heard screams of a woman over and over. It was some speep, but the explanation was the wind making the noises as it blew through the rig. Well, that's what we were told, but it totally creeped us the peep out. Some friends and I were fishing a small pond just after dark for catfish. We started to hear sounds coming off the water like someone throwing softball-sized rocks, but they were coming from all over the pond. We thought someone was messing with us, and we called out a few times for them to stop, but we eventually got freaked out and left. Cut to a few years later. I'm fishing a different pond, and hear the same sound. Turns out it was a beaver slapping its tail on the water to drive me from its territory. When beavers become problems in rivers, they relocate them to ponds in town. I work as a polar bear guard. As in, I escort people across tundra and mountains and protect them from polar bears. I once saw a snowman totem with reindeer antlers coming out of his head. It was deformed, full of bullet holes and rather creepy. Even knowing only a little about polar bears, that sounds like it can be a terrifying job. What was your closest call with a polar bear? There was one time when I was going to the gym at 6 in the morning. Because it's just to the gym, I wasn't going to bring a gun. Then I got an alert on my phone saying a bear was in the area. So I decided to stay in bed and eat malt scissors. It later turned out that the bear was on my route to the gym at the exact time I would have been walking down without a gun. And it was dark and snowy, so I would definitely have been a renter for the bear. That was off duty though. On duty, there's not really been any close calls. Just the occasional "Hey look everyone, there's a bear way over there. Have a look through my binoculars." Also just be a bit more alert. The rule is that if it is within 300 meters, I prepare to shoot it. If it is within 100 and coming towards me, that's when I really regrettably have to shoot it. I don't want to shoot a bear, and so far, I haven't had to. I hope I never do. Oh, now I have a perfect excuse to never go to the gym. Well, I know a guy, and had he gone to the gym this one time. Ugh, I have to go to the gym. Phone. Bear alert. Well, peep that. Amber alert. Spent a summer in Wyoming going to BLM land and other remote locations collecting data on bats and herpetofauna. Heard a lot of weird noises like mountain lions screaming, deer snorting, what sounded like owls fighting. Woke up one morning to find 2 bull moose sleeping 20 yards behind my tent. All of this was part of the job until one night a truck was driving towards us when we were on a BLM square in the southwestern part of the state. The truck was going overland, no road, and was slowly driving at us. It stopped about 100 yards away, turned off the lights, and we could see a person get out. They walked a full circle around us at 100 yards away, got back in the truck and turned around. This was after dark and this shadowy figure did a complete circle around us. You could hear them walking through the sagebrush, and I'm sure they could hear us talking. We packed up after that and drove to a hotel an hour away. I called the office and told them I was taking a gun when we went back out. Didn't like having the bear mace as our only defense. Edit. BLM stands for Bureau of Land Management. I used to work in the Gulf of Mexico on oil rigs for years, and it may not exactly be creepy, but I found it really unsettling. In deep, open water, the water itself is really clear, so everyone can plainly see all the tuna and barracudas hanging around the rig waiting for the onboard cook to throw off whatever food waste he needs to. Every once in a while a huge great white shark would swim up from underneath and snatch a tuna, and it really took like less than a second. They're really scary. I worked for a guy that spearfished underneath the rigs out in the Gulf. He said it was perfect since there were tons of fish underneath, and the sharks would never go between the legs. Just wait for a fish to leave. Plus the view was amazing, looking down and seeing nothing but abyss. He loved it. I can only imagine how scared I would be. Not my story, but a close friend. He used to deliver newspapers in his Jeep CJ7, which was lifted and had long throw headlights for when he would go camping / off-roading in it. He would be up as early as 3 a.m. to do his rural route. So he would be alert for deer and other wildlife that might try to cross the road in front of him. He was also big into cryptozoology. He believed in Bigfoot and other cryptids. So his mind was in that zone a lot on those nights / mornings. One early morning he was driving slowly through a curve alongside a pasture when he heard an inhuman wail. He slowed down, and as he came out of the curve his headlights lit up a pair of eyes that had to be 10 feet off the ground. He stopped, backed up and tried to get his lights to illuminate whatever it was. He heard the wail again coming from the direction of the eyes and he started freaking out, thinking he finally saw Bigfoot. As he was scrambling for his camera his eyes adjusted enough to realize what he was actually looking at. The eyes were a bull's, and they were high off the ground, because the bull was currently mounting a cow, which is where the wails came from. Our friend group ribbed him incessantly for that over the years, and any time one of us would see him, we'd ask if he found Bigfoot yet. Edited for clarity, since some people thought my friend and/or his Jeep was mounting the cow. Working late at night on a remote mine site. Changing out a switch in a substation on the edge of the pit. Just me and a quiet room full of gently humming transformers. I finish up and head for the door and I see 3 pairs of red eyes staring through the window. Nothing else visible. Just blackness and 3 sets of red eyes. Turns out goats' eyes reflect red at night. And they like staring in windows. The goats who stare at men. My parents live pretty far back in the country and have one neighboring house. The neighbors would let their basset hound outside for about 10 minutes to use the bathroom every morning. One morning they let him out and he didn't come back inside. After a couple minutes they walked out to his favorite bathroom spot and head. Judging from the tracks, a mountain lion had ambushed him and apparently torn his head off before carrying the body away. What I thought was the creepiest part was that the family hadn't heard a sound. Edit. Fixed spelling of basset. I'm not sure this counts, but I'm a teacher at an urban public school and was at work late grading and getting ready for the next day. Time had kind of flown by, and before I knew it, it was 7 p.m. I start packing up to leave in a building that is, in theory, locked and empty besides me. When our Alice alarm goes off, indicating an armed intruder in the building. I'm 1. Alone 2. Young 3. Freaked af because I'm absolutely not ready to fight a gunman over my lesson plans. I book it out of the school and dive into my car, hearing the alarm blaring the entire time. I peel out the parking lot and can see in my rear view the alarm lights still flashing and debate never going back. Cause peep that'll mayo. Turns out they were doing routine maintenance and didn't send out an email to the teachers. A similar thing once happened to me. Not quite as scary as being alone, though. I was a tutor for an elementary school where I would pull out advanced reads and conduct a book club of sorts to encourage kiddos that were ahead of their classmates to still find interest in reading. Lol. This was around the time when school shootings were getting really rampant in the US a couple years ago. So there I am, alone with 5 third graders joking around and having book club in the empty classroom I was allowed to use. All of a sudden, an alarm goes off and an announcement is made that there is an active shooter on campus and we must lock our doors and conduct active shooter protocol. I lose my peeping mind. I usher the students into a little coat closet out of view of the door, lock the door, and flick off the lights. To make it worse, me being a stupid college student at the time, I never had my phone charged. I send as many texts to loved ones as I can, trying not to alarm them, but letting them know I love them and something is happening at work before my phone dies. The students are also afraid, and about 30 minutes passes. I hear footsteps outside of the door and quite literally stop breathing, but they go past. I don't hear any shots or anything. Another 30 minutes pass, and I realize that I should call the front office to see if they have any updates. My brain goes stupid during emergencies. Apparently, I forgot that classrooms have built-in phones during my panic. They answer like nothing is wrong, and I say something like, "Hi, I'm a tutor here, and have 5 students with me in this room." Is it safe to come out? Are the police here? The woman doesn't answer for a little and Ed asks says, oh, did we not make an all clear announcement? The drill is over. I was so close to tears and just hung up. Lol. Then an announcement is made that the drill is over. Nobody thought it would be important to let an outside school contractor know about a drill that very well could have been real. I swear I could have pissed myself. I spent some time in the peat swamp forests of Borneo studying wild orangutan. We would go into the forest very early around 4 AM. One morning there was a clouded leopard on the trail we used to enter the forest. It was just crouched there watching us. We shouted, tried to act big. One of the indigenous people we worked with even took out his slingshot and shot rocks at it. He missed on purpose just trying to scare it off. It stayed there for a good 5 minutes watching us before it slowly walked into the thick brush off the cleared trail. When we walked by I shined my light to where it had walked to and could clearly see a pair of reflective eyes only 3 meters away crouched watching us pass. Creepy but also incredibly cool to see one in person for how critically endangered they are. Working on ships. There was one night I was on a ship sailing through Alaskan waters. And it happened to be my first night ever seeing northern lights. I can't believe how awesome that was. It made the sky clear. Made the night look like it was dusk. We were able to see clearly for miles. Few buddies and I hit the roof or what we call Lido deck at 1 AM just to gaze at it. An hour or so in, there were 6 of us on top. Nearly the entire crew now. A big white spotlight shines at us. We were near land, but where the spotlight was above the water, and it wasn't low enough to be on a ship. This was very high up. It shined on us for about 15 to 20 seconds. Once the light turned off we looked to see what it was. Saw nothing. No trace of an aircraft or anything. Couple minutes go by and the same light shined on us. This time it was on the other side of our vessel. Above mountains. Still. Unable to see what it was. We all saw it. We all have never seen any aircrafts hovering above these waters. Especially at 2 AM. We don't know what it was. We think it might have been some sort of silenced aircraft the military was probably doing drills or something. But anyways, that was one of the weirder things to happen out on the ocean. I've worked in Canada's north for a few years now in oil and gas. It's pretty creepy when during night shift you realize a moose has just been standing at the tree line staring you down for an unknown length of time. Or finding bear tracks crossing the tracks you just made 5 minutes ago. Honestly, the silence of a snowy forest in the dead of night 100s of kilometers away from anything is pretty spooky. When your only contact to the outside world is a radio channel nobody's listening to, you feel pretty alone. I was the creepy occurrence. I live on a ranch off of a quite dirt road. Our distant neighbor's nearest house is about 1 mile away as the crow flies. Have had issues with people stealing things out of their outbuildings and storage sheds in the area. It was also late in the year. So it was starting to get dark around 6 PM. So as a result every time I would see headlights go down our road I would watch to make sure they weren't stopping on the property. One evening I see a vehicle going very slowly down the road and come to a stop at the end of our driveway about 120 yards from our front porch. The vehicle is parked right in front of a 60s pickup I have parked. So I think whoever it is might be looking to steal it. Or just looking over the property. Whatever the case, I decide to put on a black coat and grab my rifle to go investigate. It's dark out, so I stay out of the headlights of the vehicle so I can get close. I can tell it is a white van, but I don't see anything else distinguishing about the van. When I'm about 50 yards away the van backs up and turns into our driveway. I freeze as the headlights wash across me. Standing in the middle of my eye see the reflective FedEx logos on the side of the van. Needless to say the FedEx driver probably speep his pants as he suddenly sees a dark figure standing in the middle of a field, in the dark, holding a rifle. Surprisingly, after I try to give a friendly wave and smile, he continues up the driveway to the house. And I get to explain the situation and we both have a laugh. So that's how I got to be the creepy guy in some FedEx delivery driver's story. We have a PTO pump spot that comes out of a canal for our ice fields. When I was like 12 years old my uncle found 2 bodies dumped in the little sump area where our pump sat. Both of the ladies that were dumped there had the same tattoos, so they think it was gang related, but it was 45 minutes away from where that gang operated. I still look in the hole every time I go by there, and that was 20 years ago. I work for a medical examiner and used to be on the graveyard shift alone. The first night I was on at midnight on the dot, our air system shut off, which caused the vents to warp. That beep sounded like somebody running through the vents in the ceiling on all fours. Thankfully I got used to it lol, but definition creepy at first. Another night we lost power and stupid me watching a horror movie working so hard almost peeped my pants when everything went dark, and knowing that a room with around 30 dead bodies in it was walking distance away. That one I stayed in my car for. Not to mention the constant long dark red lit hallways. Glad I'm not on overnight now. Used to teach outdoor education, which was essentially just summer camp during the school year, and school groups would come up and spend a few days at the camp. On their last night we would always tell them a scary story around the campfire. It was the same scary story every time. We worked in partners, so there were always 2 staff members for every school group. One staff member would tell the story and the other staff member would go hide in the forest and make scary noises. So I'm telling the story, and every few minutes there's like a snap of a twig or rustling in the bushes, and of course as always the kids all get freaked out and they start getting scared. It's very fun. Well, as I'm telling a story I'm walking around the campfire looking at all the kids' faces, and I noticed a familiar one. My partner Eric. Sitting there smiling at me, wondering why I'm staring at him. My heart has never started beating so fast in my life. Eventually I sped through the story and all the kids left, and I explained to Eric that I thought it was him in the woods, and his eyes got very wide, and he said, "Are you telling me that that wasn't one of the staff members?" So we both ran back to the main road. I was serving as a fireman for my nation's compulsory national service. Once, we were called into the forest to retrieve a body who was found hanging on a noose deep along one of the running trails. He had apparently committed suicide by hanging himself off a tree. Was found by a few morning joggers. What's creepy was, we found a straw doll at the foot of the tree. It was stabbed with a few red bobby pins in the head, facial area. And there was also an unknown talisman that was half burnt where the doll was sitting. When we took the body down, we had to carry him a few kilometers out of the forest, and halfway along the journey, a previously unnoticed wound on his face started bleeding. One of my men sweared that it was bleeding from the same spot as where the bobby pin was stuck on the doll, but we could not confirm it as we left the doll where his body was found for the police, passed the body to the paramedics, and booked our way out of the area. I work on large ships. If you get a clear view of a hole or passage that runs the whole length, you can actually see the whole ship warp and twist with the sea. If the passage isn't very well lit, it can look like a scene from a horror movie. I worked in a store once in a really small town that was always absolutely dead. A customer every hour or so. Shifts all alone too, which I'm sure wasn't even legal, but hey. Anyway, it's a dark evening, and I'm sat on Reddit as usual when I hear the door open. I look up and see the back of man as he begins walking down the first aisle towards the tin foods, and he appears to be talking to someone on the phone. I think nothing of it and go back to Reddit. All of a sudden I get this intense smell of soil and earth. I look up and the man's approaching the counter, and he's wearing some kind of overalls, and his face and long grey hair and body is just covered in dirt. That's when I notice he isn't on the phone at all and is just talking to himself in this absolutely bizarre tone. He sounded like a cartoon elf or something. He's just sort of murmuring and doing this really weird sort of laugh. I'm just frozen solid as he stood at the counter in front of me, thinking I'm about to be killed, when a policeman storms through the door. He asks if I'm okay, to which I don't respond because I'm just in a complete state of what the peep is happening. Tells the man to come outside, to which he starts murmuring gibberish and saying the words legal over and over again. They come grab the man and put him in the back of the police car, and that's the last I ever heard of it. I have no idea who he was, what was going on, but I have never been so afraid of another person before. You know when you just sense a bad situation. So grateful the police showed up when they did. In my brief stint as a rural health nurse, I was quite unnerved by how many of the families I worked with still practiced ritual animal sacrifice, even though on paper they identify as Catholic. I used to do agricultural work, alone in a field for 10 hours a day kinda thing. The pure amount of times I heard the sound of running and snapped up to see literally nothing there was horrific. I was convinced it was surely animals between the trees for a while, but the weirdest moment was when I heard it loudly from a row of trees next to me and immediately ducked under to see the feet of whatever animal was running by, and there was absolutely nothing. I remember trying to stay calm and walking really fast to the toilet block and sitting in there for a good long while before I came back. I never thought I'd be so freaked out in the daytime, but there wasn't a soul nearby for quite a way, and it really amped up my imagination. Actually, I don't work in remote places, but when my father was sent to Elwa, Rajasthan for archaeological study, I encountered a very strange thing. Our house was near a small forest. One morning I saw a group of blue bulls, a kind of Asian antelope. They were 5 in number, and they were running in circles around a skull for like 30 minutes, and then one of them took it into the forest and they all followed him silently. It was such a weirdo sight. It still gives me creeps. Merchant seaman here. Nothing particularly creepy. Most of the time you're too focused on not hitting anything, getting position fixes, updating logbooks, etc. to really think about paranormal or spoopy speep. But the closest thing to creepy I've experienced recently has been a strange transmission over the radio. It started with a series of Morse code beeps followed by an accented female voice listing off random letters and numbers. Dunno what the peep that was about. I do a lot of work out in the woods. Creepiest thing was finding some headless doves. I also found sticks arranged in circles and paint on the trees in the same spot. Not sure if it was part of a ritual or not, but that's what I saw. I worked night shift at a prison for years. The one thing that really creeps you out is when a hit is put on someone in the middle of the night. Inmates code says it is kept as quiet as possible. No one says a damn word. The only thing you'll hear are grunts and moans from the victims. Then, it goes and stays silent. If you hear it happening, it's already too late to stop it. It'll be over before you pull your keys out. Occasionally, if someone needs medical attention, the first sign we got was an inmate approaching the bars saying they need to go to medical and are usually bleeding, all nonchalant. The creepy ones are where no one shows up. All you get is grunts of pain and that's it. I was on guard duty at Camp Phoenix on the outskirts of Kabul in 2011. It's a 12-hour shift and it started at 7 p.m. Around 2 a.m., I could hear what sounded like footsteps running all around the guard tower. Promptly set my ass hairs on end, so I pull out my night vision and pray that it's some kids or something. I speak you not. There must have been 2 or 3 pairs of dogs humping each other at the same time. I'm not sure if this counts because it's a farm, but when you live on a farm you work on a farm, so I guess I'll tell it. I grew up on a farm, and in high school used to mess with my friends by hiding and making them find me. One night my friend was over, and we were waiting on this other guy. We see him pull up, so we take off running to hide. It's funny because they have to wander around somewhere they are unfamiliar with, or go ask my parents, and be told too bad you'll have to find her. It's like forced hide and seek. Anyway, this one night I saw my friend hide in one building, while I ran for the trees. I was hiding under some bushes and heard breathing. Like human breathing. There were no animals around. It creeped me out so bad I ran out of hiding to greet my friend. I felt so uncomfortable for the rest of the night. Sometime during the night my dad heard something and went out to investigate. In the morning he discovered that one of our cows was killed and butchered. I was a field geologist in the outback about 12 hours north of Adelaide. One day I was driving the truck and saw what looked like a flagpole sticking up in the middle of nowhere. I wasn't anywhere near a farm or anywhere else that people would be, so I decided to drive over and check it out. It was a dead dog fully impaled on a spike. Like, from butt to mouth. Took some pictures and had my boss call the cops. But for the rest of the assignment I was freaked out that a maniac was out there with me. I used to be a delivery driver, which doesn't sound very remote because it isn't. However, I did have to deliver to some pretty remote places. One time I delivered to a trailer park just barely inside our designated delivery zone, and it was very dark and poorly lit. I leave my car running and keep the headlights and inside lights on to go deliver the pizza. Upon returning to my car, I sit down in the driver's seat and look up to see a creepy old man standing less than 3 feet from my side of the car. He was just staring. It was the equivalent of a jump scare. I just started driving forward, had to do a U-turn to get out of the park. When I turned around, the man was standing in the middle of the road, so I freaked out for a second before speeding around him, only to watch him attempt to chase my car out of the trailer park. I put in my 2 weeks after that. You reminded me of something creepy that happened to me. I also used to be a delivery driver, but for a supermarket in the UK. A lot of our customers were in the middle of nowhere, and my last delivery of the night was a new customer I'd never been to before. I was already running late from all my previous deliveries, and I was still trying to find this house at 10:30 p.m., even though my shift was supposed to finish at 10 p.m. I'm driving around the narrowest of country roads with nothing surrounding me but dark fields and hedgerows, looking for anything that might be a driveway. I hadn't seen another car or person for miles. Then all of a sudden I hear a loud thud on the side of my van, like something was thrown at it. No trees or anything else around for something to fall from, and I remember it specifically hitting the side. I looked in my mirrors and out the window, but there was nothing around me. Then it happened again. Another thud on the side of my van. I drove back to the supermarket so fast and told my manager that I couldn't find the place I had spent 30 minutes looking. To be fair, there was no house where the listed address/postcode took me. Mostly just a lot of tweakable speep. But there was a time when I was hiking in a wilderness area and saw a bunch of trash bags hidden under some trees about a quarter mile off trail. About 10 miles from the nearest road. Noped out of there pretty quick. My biggest fear at work is finding a body in the woods. A two-headed snake in a Congolese forest. I'm in the Navy and work on aircraft carriers. A girl sadly hung herself in one of the spaces right near where me and my shop slept. One person swore he saw her sitting in the chair as he was getting undressed one day and ran screaming out of the berthing. I waited about a week to go into the space where she hung herself, and when I did I heard the loudest screeching noise I had ever heard in my life. I quickly turned around and got the peep out of there. The system connected to where she slept didn't work at all for the next 2 weeks or so. The systems break a lot, so it was pretty coincidental that it happened just as she did this. I used to work at a Boy Scout summer camp. Every week I had to take a big group of campers to a secluded spot for their wilderness survival badge, where they had to build a shelter out of sticks, leaves, etc. and sleep in it overnight. The spot was only about 1/2 mile from the main camp, but we took them a circuitous route that made it seem really secluded. Anyways, on this one night all the campers had made their shelters. We had cooked dinner, and were all just sitting around the campfire. It was getting late. Maybe 11:00, so I sent all the campers to their shelters for the night and started cleaning up the fire. That's when we heard in the distance what sounded like church bells. They were pretty faint, but myself and my fellow staffers could definitely hear them. They went on for about 30 minutes, ringing every 30 seconds or so. We were all a little creeped out, as there were no churches or towns within 20 miles of us. After the bells stopped, though, the singing started. It was too faint to hear the words, but it sounded like church choir music, but a lot of people, and a lot more enthusiastic. Also, it was almost midnight at this point. The singing went on for well over an hour, sometimes quieting down until we almost couldn't hear it, sometimes getting so loud we thought it was getting closer. All of the campers were super creeped out, but I lied to them, telling them there was a church service going on in camp, and that there was nothing to be scared of. Eventually, at almost 1 a.m., The singing stopped. I found out a few days later that there had been a large KKK rally only a few miles away that night, and that's what we had heard. I don't believe in ghosts, but I did see something once that I can't explain, and I have chalked it up to a trick of the brain. I used to work at a resort deep in Algonquin Park. It was basically rustic living for super rich people. It was a half-hour drive to cell service, and an hour drive to the nearest town. I finished my late shift at about midnight, and I was walking back to my cabin. I clearly saw an elderly man with suspenders and a plaid shirt walking by me on the path. We were not allowed to speak to the guests unless they spoke to us first, so I didn't say anything to him. It was pretty dark, so I turned around to make sure he was headed the right way to the guest cabins, and he had straight up disappeared. There was nowhere for him to go except into the thick woods, and if he had done that, I would have heard it. Very strange.